Let's move to this now. Donald Trump has been inaugurated back into the U.S. as president, the ultimate comeback for a man who lost the 2020 election but never stopped pushing for a return to power. He's pledged to be a peacemaker, tackle the border crisis in his country, and he's called for a national emergency or energy emergency. Let's speak now to our correspondent, Caroline Malone, who joins us from Washington, D.C. Caroline, good evening to you. And let's start with those executive orders that were signed almost immediately that President Trump stepped into his office in the White House, beginning with the World Health Organization. They are being blamed for mishandling the COVID-19 pandemic. What more did President Trump say to justify why the U.S. has to be pulled out of the WHO?
Well, that's right. President Trump withdrawing the United States from the WHO, which will take effect in about a year's time, likely to have a huge impact on global health and the type of health that people can get access to. The United States is a founding member of the WHO, and it gives the tune of about $10 million a year to the organisation to help with global health, and particularly global health emergencies. You know, the reaction that I've heard on Tuesday to this decision by President Trump is that ultimately what it's going to mean is very hard decisions by the WHO on who gets access to healthcare, because their resources will be so limited by this that the analysis suggests that it will have a huge impact on the type of healthcare that people can get access to in lots of different parts of the world. You know, President Trump holds somewhat of a beef, I think you could call it, surrounding some of the pandemic effects. At that time, it was the end of his first presidency. There was a lot of laws put into place, particularly in the United States, by the likes of Anthony Fauci, who was the head of the health organization here at the time, vaccines and mandates when it came to masks. Him and his Republican leaders at the time did not like that and tried to push back, but also the coordination globally with the WHO, Trump pushed back upon, especially when it came to information coming out of China, where the pandemic is believed to have started, where COVID-19 first took grips, killing lots of people there. So it has a lot to do with global health, but also global politics. And certainly, you know, Donald Trump will be looking at other ways, it seems, to try to handle the ongoing relationships between US and China. And I think we can expect to see plenty of announcements on that as well.
Let's talk about the LGBTQI plus community, Caroline. How are they reacting to the news that America will henceforth recognize male or female as the only genders that exist in America?
Well, this must be very devastating for people in particular who identify as transgender, for not being recognised by this new executive order. You know, there are parts of the United States that generally hold more liberal views, and the District of Columbia, where I am in Washington, D.C., is one of them. There are a lot of people here who have undergone transgender, who identify as being transgender, and for them, you know, this wasn't unexpected. They did sort of see this coming in some ways, but it's certainly a blow to how they identify and potentially, you know, their access to information and healthcare support going forward. One of the key aspects of this conversation has to do with people who are transgender, who identify as transgender, taking part in different sports. And it's certainly a complicated issue. There are some sports that women take part in where there's been pushback against competition by transgender people, particularly swimming, for example. There are other sports where it's more accepted across the board, but certainly for more hard-right conservatives in the United States, clearly who have, you know, given Trump their strong backing, that is not something that they see as being tenable going forward. I think, you know, one other major issue that Trump has signed in these first rounds of executive orders has to do with climate change. You know, that is something that doesn't just impact, clearly, people of the United States, but also people across the world. And there has also been some reaction to that from UN agencies, some of them saying, after this year in which we've seen global warming go up to record levels above 1.5, which was the agreed level that communities would try and keep the global warming to, and after this time in which the United States has seen the impact in a lot of ways economically more than other countries. We had these huge fires just recently in LA that burnt through whole neighborhoods and created absolute devastation, ash and smoke only left in some places. And yet President Donald Trump has decided this is the time to withdraw from the Paris Accord, to take actions domestically as well that make it harder or more expensive to have, for instance, electric vehicles, make it easier to push for energy from oil and gas rather than from renewable sources as well, and essentially allow there to be more pollution coming from the transport industry. So the UN agencies have reacted to that and pointed out somewhat of a contradiction between what they think ultimately will be very bad for the world.
Caroline, I've got to end the conversation on this particular question. There was a particular salute by Elon Musk while addressing those that were gathered at a venue that was especially organized for President Trump to thank his supporters. How is that being digested? Because many are suggesting that that was a Nazi salute.
Yes, I've seen that as well. A lot of commentary, particularly on the, the more democratic left side media in the United States, suggesting that this is a racist salute, ultimately. I saw the salute on video myself, and I think it's potentially quite hard to say for sure what that was, if it was indeed a salute or not. But certainly it's fueled a big conversation here in the United States about, potentially the type of person that Elon Musk is, about his sort of views, his ideologies. We know that he is, of course, quite right-leaning. We know that he's putting a lot of pressure on Donald Trump, ultimately, who may share some of the same views that he does, and particularly in European countries where his views have become quite contentious. I do think also one of the things that has been discussed greatly in US media, particularly on the Democratic side of the media here, has been these pardons that Donald Trump has given to January 6th rioters, 3 different levels, those that were violent, those that were less violent, and those that actually were involved in the planning. He has either pardoned or given clemency to all of them. So something like 1,500 people being let out of jail today, on Tuesday, who were involved in what was a huge attack on democracy in a lot of people's interpretation. So really a lot of people, in particular in the United States, concerned about that and what that says about the kind of leader Donald Trump will be going forward.
Caroline Malone, our correspondent in Washington, D.C. Thank you very much for that update tonight. And we certainly are going to continue the conversation around the World Health Organization, a special advisor to the man who leads the WHO. That conversation coming up.